Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I'm your Ubuntu King with another jewel from my crown. What if the greatest obstacle standing between African people and our collective progress is not a lack of intelligence, not a lack of resources, not even a lack of opportunity? What if the deepest obstacle is that too many of us have been conditioned to distrust, reject, and sometimes even hate anything that reminds us of ourselves? This is not an accusation, it is a diagnosis. Because a people cannot build together while secretly believing that someone else is better. For centuries, we were taught that Africa was primitive. Our languages were called broken. Our spiritual traditions were called evil. Our features were mocked. Our hair was declared unprofessional. Our names were replaced. Our history was rewritten. Then colonial borders divided Africans on the continent. Slavery separated Africans in the diaspora. New identities were formed. Black American, Jamaican, Haitian, Brazilian, Afro-Latino, Caribbean, and Continental African. These identities are real. They carry unique histories that must be respected. But something else happened. We were taught to see our differences before recognizing our relationship. Africans were taught stereotypes about Black Americans. Black Americans were taught stereotypes about Africans. Caribbeans were taught to separate themselves from both. Afro-Latinos were often encouraged to deny their African ancestry entirely. We inherited different accents, flags, and nationalities, but many of us inherited the same conditioning. Why do we become uncomfortable when someone calls us African? Why do we sometimes trust foreign businesses more than businesses owned by our own people? Why do we celebrate European languages while laughing at African accents? Why do we spend billions copying somebody else's beauty standards, fashions, and lifestyles, but hesitate to invest in African products, institutions, and communities? Why do we attack one another so quickly? Could it be that we are not always fighting each other? Could we be fighting the reflection of ourselves that history taught us to reject? Self-hatred does not always look like someone saying, "I hate myself." Sometimes it sounds like, "I'm not African. Don't associate me with those people. Black people can't work together. African countries will never develop. I would never buy from a Black-owned company. You cannot trust our own people." That is how conditioning works. It convinces the oppressed to repeat the oppressor's conclusions, even when the oppressor is no longer in the room. But let us be honest. Self-hatred is not the only reason African people face difficulty. Colonial extraction is real. Economic inequality is real. Political corruption is real. Racism, exploitation, and foreign interference are real. But those systems become even more powerful when we internalize their message and begin working against one another. The most effective prison is the one people help guard themselves. Self-hatred makes cooperation feel dangerous. Ubuntu makes cooperation feel necessary. Self-hatred asks, "How can I separate myself from them?" Ubuntu asks, "What can we build together?" Self-hatred teaches us to compete for acceptance inside systems we do not own. Ubuntu challenges us to create institutions of our own. Banks, schools, media companies, technology platforms, trade networks, farms, factories, investment funds, shipping and fulfillment systems. Not because every African must think alike. Not because we must erase our nationalities or our distinct histories. Unity does not require sameness. It requires shared purpose. We do not need to become identical. We need to stop treating our differences as reasons to remain economically powerless. Healing begins when we recognize the conditioning. It continues when we study our history beyond slavery and colonialism. It grows when we teach our children that African identity is not a burden. It is an inheritance. But pride alone is not enough. We must turn identity into responsibility. Responsibility into cooperation. Cooperation into institutions. And institutions into ownership. Buy from one another. Invest with one another. Teach one another. Protect what we build. Hold our leaders and businesses accountable. But do not demand perfection from African institutions while accepting exploitation from everybody else. If we want to move forward, we must stop asking the world to love African people more than African people are prepared to love, respect, and invest in ourselves. The truth is painful, but it is also liberating. What was taught can be unlearned. What was divided can reconnect. What was broken can be rebuilt. Our future does not depend on pretending that our differences do not exist. It depends on refusing to let those differences prevent us from building together. The question is no longer, who taught us to hate ourselves? The question is, what are we prepared to build now that we recognize it? I am. We are. We is us. and us belongs to a much larger African story, Ubuntu. I am because we are. And we will move forward when we finally understand that none of us rises permanently while the rest of us remain at the bottom. If you believe African people can transform identity into cooperation, cooperation into ownership, and ownership into freedom, share this message. Subscribe to the African Ubuntu Global Network, and tell me in the comments, what must we unlearn before we can truly build together?